For many decades, financial professionals that are value investors, people that follow Warren Buffett, business people have been repeating verbatim this Warren Buffett quote on gold, which he absolutely has hated gold. He has said that gold gets dug out of the ground in Africa or someplace, then we melt it down, dig another hole, bury it again, and pay people to stand around guarding it. It has no utility. Anyone watching from Mars would be scratching their head. This is the famous Warren Buffett quote on gold. I have had this quote thrown in my face by business people, successful business people in other industries like real estate and regular businesses and value investors, including value investing hedge fund managers who say that they can't value gold or gold stocks, for that matter, when I was pitching them a number of years ago about Sandstorm Gold in 2015 and 16 and how cheap it was. I was told by a number of different value investing hedge fund managers that they could not value gold or gold stocks. Some of them even said that gold had no value whatsoever. But let's talk about the past now. So in the past, respected people in the financial industry like JP Morgan and others used to believe that gold is money, everything else is credit. Even Warren Buffett's own father, Howard Buffett, who was an American politician, the Ron Paul of his day, in 1948 penned a piece called Human Freedom Rests on Gold Redeemable Money. And he was warning that the politicians of both parties will oppose the restoration of gold. We must win the battle to restore honest money. So Warren Buffett's views have changed. He's said in the past that he really respects his father's views. And his father was the Ron Paul of his day and more libertarian, probably before it was even called libertarian. And Warren Buffett did not respect gold, although he did respect silver in the past, but he did not respect gold. At least publicly, his comments have indicated that. But things seem to have changed recently, and probably because the dollar is looking very weak. And also Warren Buffett is dumping his bank stocks. So the 13F filings just came out for Berkshire Hathaway recently, and it was mentioned in there that Warren Buffett sold a lot of his bank stocks, whether that's Wells Fargo Bank, which I have warned about for a while now, Bank of America and Goldman Sachs. So I think Warren Buffett is very worried about how the U.S. economy is going to get a lot worse. And I think more importantly about the exposure that these large banks, specifically Wells Fargo, which has the largest commercial real estate loan book of any of the large U.S. banks, have exposure to commercial real estate. And Warren Buffett, for the first time, and maybe hell has frozen over, given all the crazy things that has happened in 2020, you can add this to the list. Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway, it came out that they have bought a little over $500 million worth of Barrick Gold shares. Now, I don't like Barrick Gold, but this is gold stock exposure from someone who has said very negative comments about gold in the past. So this is very interesting. Now, the number does seem big, over $500 million. However, in terms of total assets under management for Berkshire Hathaway, I believe it's below 1%. It might even be below 0.5%. So this is a tiny amount of gold stock exposure, but it is still gold stock exposure. And I'll talk about in a second why I think that's important. This is another article that came out recently that he makes a bet on gold, on the gold market with some gold stock exposure. Now, Barrick Gold, even though they have a lot of problems historically, they've ridden off many billions of dollars in bad deals. I've done videos on the past in the Mining Stock Education lecture series about Barrick having big egregious red flags about drastically understating their all-in sustaining costs. I don't know if it's as bad, if the issues of their costs, understating their costs, are as bad as they were a couple of years ago, but they were egregiously bad a couple of years ago. But this is an article that came out about how now he has changed and shifted to, probably because also the dollar is falling and he expects a lot more currency devaluation, and he expects the Fed's official balance sheet with how much U.S. Treasuries the Fed has to buy now. And the data is coming out recently from Lynn Alden that the Fed is buying a massive amount of treasuries because foreigners can't buy them because the global economy is not functioning. Also, foreigners are looking at the amount of the money supply and the amount of dollars created, and they're not liking what they're seeing out of the U.S. economy. So Buffett is also looking at this, and we'll have to see if he increases his gold stock exposure. But This shows that the gold mining stocks are increasing their free cash flow, and people like Warren Buffett are noticing this because Warren Buffett is big at looking at things like free cash flow increases. More importantly, this was a tweet that was put out in the last couple of days by Fred Hickey. He's a famous gold mining and technology stock analyst. I've interviewed him in the past, in the last couple of years, once for my YouTube channel. If you want to go in there and listen to the archives, where he was telling people a couple of years ago that they should start getting some gold stock exposure. But Fred points out how a lot of the big name money managers, people with decades of success, of good track records, now have exposure to being long gold and gold stocks. And Buffett was really the last person who was not bullish on gold or gold stocks, and now he's in there. But this is the last point here, is something very interesting. And Eric Sprott, Canadian billionaire resource investor Eric Sprott, has brought this up for, I want to say, about a decade, where he's been predicting, and yes, it's taken a lot longer than it should have, but at some point he said that generalist mainstream money managers, so people with tens of billions or hundreds of billions in assets under management, would start to get gold and silver exposure, would start to allocate maybe 1% of total assets under management. And if you have hundreds of billions of dollars in assets under management and you start buying gold stocks, the gold stocks are going to start to move. So yes, it didn't happen really in 2010, 11, maybe a little bit. We had nice run-ups briefly in that gold bull market, but it was nowhere near the amount of exposure that we're going to start to see, I think, in gold stock exposure in the not too distant future, because now Warren Buffett's on board, and a lot more mainstream generalist money managers, especially value investors, are going to start to take notice and say, you know what, Warren Buffett has 0.5% assets under management allocated to gold stocks. Gold stocks are the only industry, as I mentioned in my last video, generating better margins, increasing free cash flow, hiking dividends. And people are starting to take notice that this industry is really healthy right now, and that the gold price could potentially go well above $2,000 an ounce in the not too distant future. And finally, this is a chart here of, I think, the best gold stock ETF, GoAU. And it looks like right around when it was starting to correct very violently with a high volume spike there with that red line that I have in the green circle, we had a gold price rally where the gold price, after it was smashed back down to, the gold price dropped over $100 an ounce. I think it got around 1910 or so, maybe briefly below that. And now it's rallied. The gold price is almost back up to $2,000 an ounce when I'm recording this short little video. And then we have the news out from the 13F of Berkshire Hathaway adding gold stocks. Now, I think the more important thing here is that other value investors, other generalist money managers that did not have any gold stock exposure, I think Eric Sprott's thesis that he has been predicting for the last 10 years or so will start to play out. I think Warren Buffett will start to lead in more generalist money managers and more conventional value investors into gold, because many financial professionals who do like gold and silver and do like gold stocks have had to take a lot of shit for years now from regular business people and regular value investors. Sometimes these money managers have said that gold is worthless, they can't value it, and they don't want to touch it. Well, now Warren Buffett has gold exposure. And yes, it's not a massive amount in his portfolio yet, but I would not be shocked if he starts adding gold exposure with additional gold stocks, especially given the margins that these gold stocks and gold miners have, the free cash flow and the dividend increases. All these three things that I just mentioned are all something that Warren Buffett and other value investors are going to greatly appreciate, especially in this environment where most other companies and most other industries are not doing those things, and the exact opposite is occurring.